Hi there everybody. I wanted to put this video together to kind of review and compare two popular airbrush systems that are sold out on the market right now. So here we've got the Master Pro G22 and the Iwata Eclipse HP-CS. The G22 sells for about $20 or $30 primarily through Amazon and some other online retailers, and the Iwata Eclipse sells for anywhere between $100 and $190. Usually you'll get the best price for this at your local hobby shop. I've seen it on Amazon recently for $180 and $190, which is quite a bit. I purchased this one for $142.99. So does price make a big difference in quality? Yes, it does. I feel that I have a lot more control with the Iwata. It seems to be a lot more consistent, and to be frank, that's why I have it here. I just found that the G22 wasn't going to be able to do everything as well as I wanted it. But let's run through the pros and cons of each, because maybe it will work for you. So again, the first pro is that it's only about $20. Second pro is that you pretty much buy all the parts on Amazon. And the third advantage is that for some basic painting like stencil work and masking work and maybe some RC car bodies and putting down some large areas of paint on an RC model, it should work just fine. Now, some cons that I have with the G22. Well, it's hard to get it to do really fine detailed work. It comes with a 0.35 needle, which should be good enough for some relatively detailed work. I just find that because the trigger is a bit firm and difficult to control, it's hard to get a good line out of it. And I also found that paint would not leave the nozzle and spray on the surfaces as consistently as it does with the Eclipse here. Now, talking about the Eclipse, some of the pros are that there's a lot of support for this brand at local hobby shops. There's also parts available on Amazon, although again they do tend to be a bit more costly than at your local hobby shop. It's very consistent. I've had no issues with predicting how the paint is going to fly out of the nozzle whenever the trigger is in certain positions. If there is a mistake, I always feel like the mistake is because of my hand-eye coordination, not because of the mechanics of the airbrush, whereas I can't say that's true with the G22. A lot of times where I'd be using the G22 and honestly feeling like I'm doing everything right with my hand-eye coordination and my trigger control, and I'll get like a little random splatter or something, or I'll be pulling the trigger way back and down and hardly any paint is coming down. Like the nozzle is getting clogged up way more quick than it should, even though I'm practicing the proper methods to prevent the nozzle from getting clogged up. Just seem to be very finicky and somewhat inconsistent compared to the Eclipse HP-CS. Now, one other thing I really liked about the HP-CS is that there's a wide range in the thickness of the line that you can throw with it. You can paint a very thin hairline line with the Eclipse, or a really fat line, and everything in between. It will really throw a lot of paint out if you really pull that trigger all the way back and down. Whereas with the Master G22, even with the trigger all the way down and back, it doesn't throw a ton of paint. So when you're trying to paint like the inside of a car body or a large area, really anything the size of an envelope, like a small envelope or bigger, you have to make a lot of passes. You got to go back and forth a whole bunch. Whereas this one, it will really toss a lot of paint if you want it to, but it will also make those very fine, detailed lines when needed to. So, before I got the HP-CS, since one of my concerns was the inability of the G22 to throw a lot of paint for purposes of like priming or just adding like a large area of color, like the whole front end of this RC car, for example, I thought, well, maybe if I purchased the larger needle and nozzle set that would allow more paint to come out, maybe that would solve the problem. So I went ahead and ordered that stuff on Amazon, and you need 3 parts. You need the 0.5 needle, you need the nozzle, which, I mean, look how tiny that thing is. A tiny little nozzle there, and the cap. So you get those 3 parts for about $10. I got them, I installed them onto the G22, added my paint, and nothing would come out. I would pull the trigger and just nothing, like hardly even any air would come out. It was like the whole thing was sealed up or clogged. So I disassembled everything, investigated to see if there was, some user error, something I was doing wrong. There wasn't. So I started to play around with it and I could not get it to work. So I thought, well, maybe I just got a bad needle and cap set. So I sent it all back to Amazon. They sent me a new set and I put that on the gun, and same problem, still no paint. So I did some reading online, and it seemed like a lot of other people were having this problem, and one user said that if you loosen the cap here to about like this, then it works. So I tried that and it did, but come on, I mean, that's kind of lousy. So you have this loose cap that's freely rotating and spinning out of position as you're painting with the 0.5 needle. That's just not right. That's poor craftsmanship. I just didn't like that idea. So, I mean, I suppose a workaround, you could put some Teflon tape in there or maybe a little washer or something, but you have to get it just right. Like the difference between here and here is the difference between the paintbrush, the airbrush working and not working. So, that just makes it really kind of difficult to use. So I took the 0.5 needle and cap set off and put the 0.35 back in, and it worked okay with the 0.35, aside from some of those little difficulties that I've already mentioned earlier in this video. But the G22 is what I had first, and being new to airbrushing, I thought, well, maybe all airbrushes are finicky like this. But the only way to find out is to go ahead and spend the money and buy the more expensive one, which is what I did. I got the Iwata Eclipse for about $142 and hooked it up to the same compressor, used the same paints that I was using in the G22, and right off the bat, I realized why people want to spend more money on an airbrush, because you do get more when you spend more, at least with the Iwata. It was way easier to control. The paint came out way smoother, whether the paint was thinned or not, whether the paint was enamel-based paints or water-based paints or cheap paints or fluorescent paints or candy paints. Just everything worked better with the Eclipse. And on top of that, I found that, again, this one would throw way more paint than this one. When I bought this, I went ahead and bought the 0.5 needle set at the same time before I even tried this. And I could tell you, I am not going to need this. For most of my priming jobs or any situation where I need to get a lot of paint, like for example, if I wanted to paint this entire box, I could do it with probably 4 passes, with the Iwata Eclipse. Whereas using the Master Pro, I'd have to probably go over it 20 times back and forth to get it to put enough paint down to cover it. All right, so I think just a few final things I want to go over. A couple gripes that I have with the G22 over the Eclipse. Again, look at the size of this nozzle. It's so tiny, and those threads that you have to screw into the end of the airbrush are so small that they are easy to strip. It's just, and easy to lose, just really questionable. Compare that to the nozzle for the Eclipse. It's much larger. And, you know, by the way, if you do get the Eclipse and if you do want to put the 0.5 nozzle on it, you will need 3 parts. They're right here. You'll need, obviously, the 0.5 needle, which is part I6171. You'll need the nozzle, which is part I6041, and you'll also need the cap, which I don't have, but you know, this is what the cap looks like for the G22. The cap is I6021. You need those 3 parts to run the 0.5 nozzle setup on the Iwata. The Iwata comes with the 0.35, but like I said, for pretty much anything smaller than an RC car, the 0.35 is going to be perfectly sufficient. All right, so that's my quick review. I think I might have missed a couple things here. I might add those in the comments later as I think of them. But I hope this helps you figure out what you want. You can get the Iwata and an inexpensive compressor for a total of probably, you know, $250, $300. Compare that to the G22 compressor combo kit for about $140. It's worth, in my opinion, spending the extra $150, $60 to get the Iwata. I think you're going to be much happier. It's going to be a better airbrush, and it will suit more purposes, and you could just do more with it. You know, fine modeling work, more realistic paintings, drawings as you develop your interest into other areas. So I hope this helps, and keep hobbying, everybody.